Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me through benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is internationally syndicated solely due to the love and support that you all continue to give. We're available across all major distributors, and as long as you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in, because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Doug Burleigh. And we're going to be discussing Doug's incredible book, Jesus Changes Everything. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's a lot of other places. But to gather everything that he has in store, check out his personal site, JesusChangesEverythingBook.com. There, you're going to gather more information on him, on the book, hyperlinks found to take you to the purchasing pages. Man, listen, it really is a one-stop shop. Head on over there today. Once again, that's JesusChangesEverythingBook.com. And I quickly want to take this opportunity and point out the fact that Doug was brought to us by one of the best publishing firms in the business, City of Books. So for my writers out there listening in, if you have gone through your process and now you need some assistance moving that book you developed, head on over to cityofbooks.com and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Doug here on the line. People, listen, man, right there in the title, you got an idea of what we're discussing. But I promise you, an idea is all you got. Because the moment you start to read the words on the pages of this book, it's going to throw you for a loop, man, because I promise you, you're not expecting where this book is coming from. Imagine if following Jesus wasn't about rules, but it was more about a revolution, right? Not about religion, but a radical rewiring of your entire life in your belief system. See, I love what Doug is talking about here in his book. He's pulling from his experience, from his journey. But people, man, this is not about getting involved in a particular religion, more so than it's about getting involved in Jesus. Now, I know some of you listening in right now, you're like, oh, Benji, what are you talking about, man? We're not getting involved in religion, but we're getting a better relationship with Jesus. What are you talking about, brother? Well, people, sit back and strap in, because that's exactly the conversation at hand. Doug is going to articulate from his perspective the difference between the journey that many of us have been on and why some of us have maybe gone about things in an incorrect way. All right. So for those of you out there listening in that are tired of performative Christianity and hungry for a faith that actually changes you, this conversation, as well as this book, man, it's going to be your wake-up call. Sit back and strap in. Doug, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, friend.
Doug, listen, man, it is a pleasure to have you here. I love what you're talking about in your book, and it's something that is right up my alley. I have been on the record a number of times of talking about my personal belief in how I've always considered myself spiritual rather than religious. And I look at the way religion in particular, and I'm not going to go at any one particular religion in general, because I think that they all do it to a certain degree, and how religion has been utilized and can be very manipulative in certain aspects. And that's as far as I'm going to go with it, because it's not pertinent to today's discussion. But the connection that I'm making here, when you're talking about saying no to religion and yes to Jesus, man, that is a profound statement. And something that I'm looking forward to diving into. Before we go into the nitty gritty, start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and your background.
I've had two careers that I really consider of one. I spent 26 years with an organization called Young Life. It's a large international organization that works with teenagers. And I was president the last 6 years of that time. And then I went and spent a year in Russia with Billy Graham, helping lead the crusade in 1992 for thousands of Russians. And following that, I've spent the last 30 years involved with the National Prayer Breakfast movement, the organization. People call us the fellowship, but it's the most visible thing is the prayer breakfast. But it's a relational ministry around the world. I've been traveling to Russia and Ukraine for the last 60 years. And that's a special place for me with a lot of relationships. But I've really been working with young people the last 60 years.
What I'm taking from that, Doug, aside from it just being remarkably impressive, first and foremost, is when it comes to this subject matter, this is what you know. People, it is coming from a knowledgeable place, man. He is not just spewing things. He's talking from a life that he has lived and something he is very knowledgeable in. So let's dive right in now. Jesus changes everything. Doug, tell us more about this fantastic book.
Well, what I'm trying to do is to communicate the difference between religion, and I would define religion as man's effort to reach God, and Jesus. And I define Jesus as God's effort to reach man. And in the first chapter of the book, where I talk about the goal or the purpose according to Jesus, which is to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, I have two little boxes. One of them says religion, and below it, rules and performance. The other one, in big letters, has Jesus, love, relationship. And I, guess that probably 70-80% of followers of Jesus, people that go to church, let's say, live primarily in the first box. I'm not trying to judge them. I'm not trying to say whether they're going to heaven or hell. That's between them and God. But I do believe they've missed what they were created for.
Yeah.
And that is a love relationship with a person. On the back of my book, it says participating in religion or having information about Jesus is not the same as knowing Jesus personally. There's a significant difference between pursuing a personal encounter with Jesus and pursuing information about Jesus. Information alone can become heavy religious baggage. Information does not love, forgive, comfort, save, or heal. Jesus does. So many people desire a closer relationship with Jesus and are seeking deeper understanding of his teachings. Would it surprise you to know Jesus has the same desire? He wants to know you, to love you, to be part of your life. And the teachings of Jesus reveal the heart of Jesus as nothing else does. That's what I'm trying to do, is communicate what he shared with his disciples in those 3 years of public ministry 2,000 years ago.
I'm right there with you on so many notions that you brought up. Another point that I want to go into, and I think, listen, this is, I think, really the heart of your book and really the crux of all of this. You mentioned how after readers pick up your book and get through it, one of the things that they're going to learn, as I mentioned in my opening, was how to say yes to Jesus and no to religion. I think that is an explosive statement and really gets to the heart of so much of this. Sorry if I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think really, man, it's the question of the hour. Talk to us a little bit more about what you mean by that and the process of delineating the two.
What you think about the 12 disciples, and it's interesting about them. It's awful easy for us to deify them, to make them something they weren't. I want to read you a quote from Frederick Buechner about the 12 disciples. He said, the first ministers were the 12 disciples, but there's no evidence that Jesus chose them because they were brighter or nicer than other people. In fact, the New Testament records suggest they were continually missing the point, jockeying for position, and when the chips were down, interested in nothing as much as saving their own skins. Their sole qualification seems to have been their initial willingness when Jesus said, "Follow me," to rise their feet and to their feet and follow him. It sounds like that's an insult. Really, what happened was over those 3 years, their lives changed. As they spent more time with Jesus, they became more and more like him. There's a passage in the New Testament that says the disciple, when fully trained, will be like his teacher. I think that's true. And they became more and more like him. I think the same thing is true 2,000 years later, is if I fill my mind with his teachings and his thoughts and spend time with him in prayer and fellowship and so on, I believe that quietly my life begins to change, not because I'm trying to change it, but because I get to know this person who is the greatest leader in all of human history. And 2,000 years later, we're still talking about him and what he's like and who he is. And ironically, his teachings are the opposite of the way the world thinks. So let me give you a couple of examples. The world says, take everything you can. Jesus says, give, and it will be given unto you full measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. The world says, be first. Jesus says the last will be first. The world says leadership is giving orders. And by the way, you don't have to do what you tell them to do. Didn't COVID show us that? Jesus said, no, leadership is servanthood. And he was the example of all the things that he taught. Okay. Yeah, I could go on and on. The world says, save your life. Jesus says, the one that loses his life for my sake will save it. On and on, the opposites. We live in a world that a lot of people just totally miss the truth of this. I recall I've spent a lot of time in Russia, and I met with a group of members of parliament, the Duma. And I remember the day I brought a sheet that had 10 or 12 of these opposites. All I did was read it to them. They weren't followers of Jesus, but they'd been to the prayer breakfast. They were somewhat interested. One guy said, do you mind, we were at the National Hotel across the street from Red Square, and he said, do you mind if I get a copy of that? And every person in the group, 10 of them, asked for a copy. And I thought, isn't that interesting? There's something that tickles the human heart about truth when we hear it. Another example would be the world says, hate your enemies. Jesus says, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. All these opposites that somehow when we hear them, we want to hear more because they're so different than the way the world communicates it. In the Old Testament, through God speaking in Isaiah, he said, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, says the Lord, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my thoughts are higher than your thoughts and my ways than your ways. So I think that's the fundamental thing I'm trying to communicate is Jesus changes everyone and everything. I don't. Religion doesn't. Christianity doesn't. By the way, it's a term never used in the scripture. We have it as one of the world religions. And I was in college, I was in a fraternity with a bunch of non-believers, and they would come to my room, always alone, always late at night. And one of the questions they ask is, how do you know Christianity is the right religion? It doesn't seem fair that Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, and so on are all going to hell. That was a tough question for me to answer. I would answer it totally different today. I would say I don't think it is the right religion. I think Jesus came not to establish a religion, but a love relationship with us, which is why he says to all of us, follow me. So that's what we're trying to do, is follow him. And as we do, and we absorb his teachings, and if I were going to have another name for this book, From Jesus Changes Everything, it might be Jesus Curriculum, but that doesn't sound as interesting.
So, it doesn't flow off the tongue as well, everything. Right?
Yeah.
Listen, man, as we start to close out, because this is such a profound book with so many great notions. People, listen, we've barely scratched the surface, all right? You know where you got to go. Again, it's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's JesusChangesEverything.book.com. You got to head on over there. You got to purchase your copies for yourself. As we close out, so let's just say, okay, I'm a listener, listening in right now here, Doug. I'm listening to what you're saying, and things are clicking. It's making sense. What is one tangible way that someone listening in right now can start following Jesus today that may disrupt their religious routine, actually deepen their faith.
At the end of the book, I give a challenge to people. I call it the 90-day challenge, okay? And there's 89 chapters in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, okay? The Gospels, the four Gospels. So I say the question I'm asking is, how big is your Jesus? Not the one at the right hand of the Father, the one you've got. How big is he? And probably the greatest thing that could ever happen to any of us is our Jesus, the one we've got, the one we live with each day, gets bigger and bigger. So I've had a number of folks do this, and they write me. I put that at the end of the book, gave them an email address if they wanted to do this. But so day one, they start with Matthew 1. They read it 3 or 4 times, each time more slowly, okay? Mm-hmm. And then finally, in their journal, they write the answer to 2 questions. What did I learn today about Jesus that I didn't know? How he walks, how he talks, how he lives, how he loves. And the second question, how does it apply to my life? I make them a promise. If you do that diligently, let's say you take a half an hour a day for 90 days and you get 1 day off, I promise you something. Your Jesus is going to get bigger and bigger. And I think the greatest thing that can happen to us as we face all the challenges, all the heartaches and the heartbreaks and the ups and downs that life brings, is that my Jesus is big enough to help me walk through those things with joy, with faith, with ebullience, different things that I want in my life, as opposed to doubt, anger, fear, all the things that are so prevalent in our society. So it's real practical. I just asked the question, how big is your Jesus? And I think that's the reason I wrote the book, is to make his teachings come alive for people and personalize them so that I don't get more religious. I get more in love with Jesus.
I'm telling you, this is one that you need to pick up. At the end of the day, this isn't just a book, man. It is an invitation, right? That's how I like to categorize it. As I look at the book, as I listen to the words Doug is discussing, this is an invitation to trade religion, to trade rituals for real relationships, right? To really get to know Jesus and understand that when you are on that road, when you're on that path, that journey, it isn't about being perfect, right? It's not about having this perfect attendance in the pews. It's about being remade. It's about formulating this relationship. And I think what's so interesting, Doug, as I hear you talk, man, like I mentioned, I've never been a very religious person, always someone that has been spiritual. I've had my own belief, my own relationship with God. And I remember years ago talking to someone that was very religious. She was such a strong follower. And I guess let me correct that, because now we're utilizing it and we're really defining the term religious. So I don't want to say that she was religious, but she had a fantastic relationship with God, was raised in a wonderful family. And I remember talking to her, and she pointed out, she was like, Benji, you just got to have, she categorizes Jesus as just a loving father. And it's not about, okay, how do you say the prayers properly? Can you recite scripture back? Like all of those things, it has its time and its place. But the point that she was making, she was like, Benji, he just wants to have a relationship with you. He just wants to talk to you. And I remember when she said that to me, it almost felt like such a liberating thing. Like for the first time, someone had articulated a relationship with God that wasn't based upon so much structure, but based upon a genuine, authentic relationship. And when we look in turn,
I actually have a passage from Jesus that I think says it. He said to his disciples, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me." And that's what we want to do, is to learn of him.
Yeah.
For I am meek and lowly of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Benji, that's the opposite of what you hear a lot of times about religion. There's rules and performance and shoulds and oughts and so on. The opposite. I think that's what he calls us to. Those are his words in Matthew 11:28-30.
This is your wake-up call. All right. The alarm is blaring. This is your wake-up call. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's JesusChangesEverythingBook.com. Head on over there. Pick up your copies today. Remember, the question isn't whether you believe in him, but whether you'll actually follow him. I'm saying, man, listen, friends, that changes absolutely everything when you examine it from that perspective. Head on over, pick up your copies today. Doug, this has been a true pleasure, man. An absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest. People of distinction.
Thank you, Benji. It's been fun being with you, brother. Blessings.